Come one, come all. We have returned for yet another episode of an Evolved Review, and we are here today to talk about House of the Dragon, episode one. But I'm not here alone. I am here with none other than returning to the show. He is from the Superhero Homies podcast. You can hear his voice all throughout the interwebs. You can even hear several episodes of this exact program. Welcome back, the ace of professional wrestling, superhero homie, Extreme Q. Welcome back, sir.
Man, thank you for having me back. As soon as I heard news that an Evolve Review was coming back, I knew I had to get with my lawyers and get a contract drawn up so that I could be on some episodes here, man. Glad to be back.
Well, yeah, man. There were a couple other people obviously we had to reach out to first. You know how it goes.
Not
Uh,
really. I mean, but okay.
I, I think if I did have a legal staff here at Entertainment Evolved, then they probably want to know why I have recorded more episodes of your podcast this year than this one. But I'm trying to make up for that because this is going to make the third episode in as many days. We just recently put out. I sat down with Tim Blackman for a little interview for the comeback. Broke all the records on that. We got like
Mhm.
200 listens in the first couple of hours. I mean,
Please.
just a really nice kind of surprise. We didn't tell anybody about that. Not a soul knew that we were doing that.
Yeah,
Um,
we spoke off mic about that, and I was like, man, yeah, I listened to it as soon as it dropped, and I did not see that coming.
yeah, I mean, I've been saying that I really wanted to change the kind of narrative here. We've been a wrestling focused product, and I really wanted to branch out from that. And I thought, what better way to do that than to just kind of sit down and have a conversation with someone?
Hmm.
And I thought that was cool. So we did that, and then just today I posted Caleb Stovall and I last night. We covered the first three episodes of A&E's biographies for WWE for season two. Talked a little bit about some Undertaker, some Goldberg, and some Bella Twins.
Yes.
So, and now here we are. This is going to be a brand new series, kind of for us. I'm committed to covering every episode of House of the Dragon. So this is going to be episode one. I already got a guest lined up for next week to come on do episode two and possibly episode three. So I'm very excited to kind of continue the coverage here of this and take it forward. Um, Before I get into that, though, I want to talk about a different dragon for a second. I want to talk about you and I next week are going to embark on a journey to the one, the only Dragon Con.
Man, I cannot wait. I have been extremely stoked for this, and yeah, brother, I'm looking forward to it.
It's interesting because obviously due to the name, when Game of Thrones was on, there was always like really heavy Game of Thrones kind of influence at Dragon Con, and
Mm.
then season eight killed that, and then the pandemic happened, and you were there with me last year. I mean, there was no, I mean, you didn't see any Game of Thrones stuff.
No,
Um,
no,
I
no.
I have to wonder if it's too close, for the hype for this show to really hit it this year. Maybe next year we'll see it big, but I might be wrong. A lot of these vendors and these cosplayers are very efficient.
Man, they are. But man, they would have to be damn near time travelers to make it work, just because of the timing of it all.
That's true. They would have to be like South Park production schedule level.
Right.
But man, we found out today that Brian Michael Bendis is going to be there,
Yes.
which is a huge deal. I mean, honestly, when we look at the lineup of like comic creators, and this is your wheelhouse, absolutely. Look at the lineup of the comics creators we had there last year. You would look at that and go, "There's no way we're going to have anything close to that this year."
Right. Last year was stacked.
And
But then
yeah,
this year, it might. I mean, I don't want to compare different writers, but I mean it might have it beat this year.
I think so, and I think a lot of that has to do with, it's like, yeah, I mean, Chris Claremont's not going to be there, and I know for you, that's, he's, I don't want to speak for you, but I mean, he's top five easy, right?
Oh
I
yeah,
mean,
easily.
like I mean, he's in the goat discussion.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And I would agree with that too, just from the stuff that I have read. But I mean, this year, I mean, we're adding Bob Hall,
Yes.
John Romita Jr. is coming back, and
Right.
then they're added Jim Starlin, who is the Thanos creator. And then today we found out they're added Brian Michael Bendis as well. So I mean that's a lineup, man, and that's just one aspect of the monster that is Dragon Con.
Yeah, that's insanity. And just one more thing before we get off of that, and that is, with last year's lineup of comic creators, they were all legendary, but they were mostly from like kind of the same era of comics, mostly like the 80s and 90s era, which is one of my personal favorite eras of comics. But the cool thing about Dragon Con this year with the comic book people is that we're getting kind of a spread. Jim Starlin kind of comes from that class of 70s and 80s comics, and 90s as well. And but then we also have people like Bob Hall, who's really also like 80s and 90s, and then we get like Brian Michael Bendis, who was like late 90s, 2000s.
Right.
And so it's kind of like a really cool spread there.
Yeah, and he has a lot of the folks last year it was very Marvel centric, and I
Mhm.
think this year it's kind of spread out a little more. Obviously, all those people have done work for Marvel, but a lot of them
Right.
have done work elsewhere as well. So
Yeah. I was actually thinking about this earlier today, before you told me that Bendis was going to be there, but I was thinking about Jim Starlin, and I was like, how epic or how big of a creator you have to be when you were one of the people who put together a death in the family. But when people think of you, they don't even think about that. They think
right.
about they think about Thanos and Infinity Gauntlet. I'm like, that's a legacy.
And what's very interesting on that too is there's gonna be a Jason Todd panel,
I saw that.
and we probably will be there.
Yes.
And Jim Starlin is on it, so
Oh,
uh,
he would have to be.
and they haven't even added Bendis, I don't think, to the schedule yet. But I'm
Mm.
sure we'll get him,
Oh yeah.
doing something.
Yeah.
So I'm I'm super excited about that. So now before we get into the main event here, I wanted to talk a little bit about superhero homies. I know I'm not really even a guest over there anymore. I'm more of just like a seasonal co-host.
You're right.
Uh,
Yeah,
but
you're on the regular scheduled programming now.
hey, that's right. That's right. So, there you guys have been putting out banger after banger after banger. You guys just put out some superhero TV reviews, which I won't put you on the spot about, even though I disagree with like all of your takes.
Mhm.
But we can talk about that off mic.
Yep. Yep.
You guys recently ranked all of the MCU villains, which I thought was a riveting, like two-part series that I thought was really good. I mean, like that may be my favorite topic I think on the show all year, and I wasn't on it.
That was a lot of fun to put together.
Yeah, I mean it was really good, and I'm definitely glad that you didn't allow Kevin to rank Obadiah Stane over Loki.
I
I
couldn't I
appreciate
couldn't have that happen. I couldn't.
I appreciate that quite a bit. The Shakespearean rendition
Yes.
of Loki, not whatever.
Right.
Um, but yeah, man. If you want, let the listeners know a little bit. Where they can find the podcast and like what you guys got coming up.
Absolutely. So you guys can find the Superhero Homies podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. We're on Google, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, iHeart Music, wherever you guys get your podcast from. I can guarantee you'll find us there as well. And in terms of what we typically cover, things we cover comic book events, superhero TV shows, superhero movies, and then more like the theoretical questioning surrounding superhero nature. Um, but for some of our upcoming content, oddly enough, one of those would be a coverage of Dragon Con, once I return from that venture. That would be a lot of fun. Speaking about all the cool stuff that we're going to see there, another one of our episodes coming up is that we will be doing a discussion on one of my personal favorite comic books that actually isn't really a part of like a major label in terms of it being Marvel or DC. It's called Something is Killing the Children. It's a very riveting book that is less superhero in nature, but it definitely was something that revitalized the comic book industry, especially in the last couple of years. Um, but yeah, we also have a lot more coming down the pipeline as well in terms of covering more TV shows such as She-Hulk and whatnot. But yeah, there's always a lot coming down the line, so always keep your eyes posted for that, guys.
Awesome, man. I know that I personally, this is one of my go-tos. So I definitely spend a lot of hours on the road, and so it's always near the top of my podcast playlist. So I could not endorse the show any heavier. Um, that being said, let's talk a little bit about a show that I definitely could skip endorsing. Let's talk about Game of Thrones for a minute. Let's talk about the legacy here for just a second before we get in to House of the Dragon. So let me ask you this: so what was your hype level at let's say at the end of season 1 of Game of Thrones versus how you felt at the end of season 8?
Uh, so for me, the hype was a little bit different, I think, than most people because I didn't jump on Game of Thrones until I believe season 3, and that was really at your request. Um,
That
and
tracks.
yeah, and so when I started watching Game of Thrones, uh, I was like, okay, this is it's not slow, but it really is taking its time unfolding. A lot of different characters and moving pieces, but I'm really enjoying it. And by the end of season 1, I was hooked. I was absolutely hooked, and I was so glad that I didn't have to wait a whole year and a half or whatever, however long to the next season. I could just go straight to season 2 and so forth and so on. By the time I got to the end of season 8, um, I mean, I don't say this facetiously. I mean it quite literally. I kind of wished that we had never gotten anything. Uh,
Right.
there are certain cases when nothing is better than something. I think that everybody's head canon would have been much better than the actuality of what we got.
I was talking to a friend of mine today who is a book reader like myself,
Mhm.
and she it has read the entire Song of Fire and Ice series, and I may actually she hasn't fully agreed to it yet. I may end up having her on a future episode, but she knows more about Targaryen lore than I do by a long shot.
Oh,
Yeah, so as someone who read these books, I had a different kind of take on it. As far as like being a book reader or whatever, on the internet, us book readers used to cheekily call the people who had not read the books the Unsullied. That's what we referred to them as. But as the series went on, it got more and more where the book readers didn't know anything. By the time you get to about season 6, we were in the dark.
hmm.
Um, but I was like, if I was George R. R. Martin, I would just swerve it hard. I would have like Stannis doesn't burn his kid and ends up on the Iron Throne, or like, or maybe he does go to burn poor Princess Shireen,
Hmm.
and she doesn't burn, and like, surprise, she's the third head of the dragon, and she's a Targaryen, and we go that route, and somehow she ends up on the throne at the very end. I was like, I would just do anything other than what happened on HBO.
Yeah, yeah, and man, it was so weird. I've never seen something both subvert expectations and not subvert expectations, but yet simultaneously fail at doing both.
It really hit hard. I think we kind of got, I would say, the 1, 2, 3 punch with the subverting expectations being terrible, because we got I think that what started it was probably Lost, and then we got Last Jedi,
Mm.
and then we got Game of Thrones.
Yeah, yeah.
Those were the three big, enormous cultural things where the swerve was attempted, but it wasn't earned.
If I could add one thing to that, it would be that they all have something in common, and that is the creators or showrunners or directors didn't really know the end from the beginning.
Well, actually, Game of Thrones does not have that in common.
Really?
George R. R. Martin laid out everything for them in the beginning,
And
that,
including the ending.
including the ending. They spent like several days with George of him just talking about it. And whenever I envision that meeting in my head, it's definitely the George R. R. Martin from South Park. And there's definitely the Wiener Choir in the background,
Hmm.
interrupting them every like 10 minutes.
As they
Um,
should.
and yeah, and it was so bad to the point where I was watching Westworld recently, and I guess this was somewhere before the Immense Hatred came out, but in season 3 of Westworld, and this is a very mild Westworld spoiler from a 2-year-old season, so I'm gonna let it fly here.
Mhm.
They actually go through the lab where they do all the creation and stuff, and Dan and Dave are in there with Drogon from Game of Thrones because they have like a fantasy park.
I saw that. I remember that scene. Yeah, yeah.
I remember hearing about it, but I was like, well, I'm never going to watch Westworld again because season 2 is terrible, so I'm not going to worry about it. And I had put it out of my mind, and I recently, as you know, picked Westworld back up, and I was watching it, and we got to that scene, and the amount of fury that immediately built up within me was ridiculous.
Oh,
I got ridiculously just unexplicably angry. But the fact that the two of them have nothing to do with House of the Dragon, I think, is the biggest thing it had going for it before the show started.
now to comment on the earlier remark you said about how you referred to like on the internet, anyways, the book readers referred to the strictly TV watchers as the Unsullied. First of all, that's rude as fuck. Uh, and secondly, um, you guys can definitely say that about House of the Dragon, right? Because the entirety of those events are chronicled, right?
At, so so two things. Number one, yes, it was a dick move, and it was really arrogant for the online community to do that. Um, Number two, wait until the Sanderson stuff starts to come out. I will be unbearable. Uh, I will be completely intolerable, especially if they ever do an adoption of Stormlight, which
Mm.
I am against. In all, like, I am Alan Moore when it comes to that. Like, I don't care if they give him $1 billion and say you make all the decisions. I don't want it. I never ever want to see it. No adaptation.
But you would watch it though, and that's the crazy thing.
I would hate watch it. Yes, all of his other works I am completely for, but that one, I mean, it's like it, it's pretty much exactly what your thoughts on the Sandman were. It's like,
Mhm.
yes, I think you could go and film this shot by shot, but can you get the soul of it?
Mhm.
And I don't think
Yeah,
the answer
yeah.
to that is yes. I mean, I just don't think so. But that could be a whole nother episode. Um, I digress. But so when you mention Fire and Blood, so that's the book that's out, basically the history of the Targaryens. Here's the interesting thing they're doing with the show. That novelization or what have you is the recorded histories. But what we know about recorded history is that the victors write that history.
Right.
So this show is intended to be the true series of events, which is an interesting way to do it because you can veer from the source material and have it make sense.
Yeah, that's actually very clever because you can veer from the source material without technically veering from the source material.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's like, yeah, the people who won wrote this, but this is what actually happened.
Right.
There's probably not anything in there about what Viserys does in this episode. Speaking of, from this point forward, full spoilers for episode 1 of House of the Dragon. If you somehow listening to this 20 minutes in and haven't gathered that we're going to talk about it, and you're still here. So I want to set the stage here for the show. So in the beginning, and they kind of breezed through this pretty quickly, which I thought was good because the last thing we needed to do is have this huge lore dump at the beginning if we're trying to get casuals back in. All the main characters being Targaryens is going to make the names hard to deal
Hmm.
with, I think, for a lot of people. But I think we'll get there. So we start off with King Jaehaerys, and uh, his kind of moniker is the Old King. Like he was, he got the crown at a very young age. Um, he followed up a king named King Maegor the Cruel, and he was the king for like over 50 years.
Mm.
Jaehaerys was,
Okay.
because he got the crown at such a young age.
Yeah.
And then he really had nobody to pass on the crown to. All of his immediate children were already gone. All of his sons were pretty much gone. Um, and so basically, they let all of the great houses for the Seven Kingdoms kind of in the only like form of democracy in Westeros ever. They kind of got to all give an opinion on who should get the crown. And the overwhelming pick, because the main two options were Viserys and then Rhaenys. And as we all know, the you know the last thing that any medieval aged men want to do is listen to any women of any kind.
Right.
So,
Right.
so Viserys was like the obvious choice to end up on the throne, and or at least he was the popular pick. And that's where the show starts us, is with him on the throne. And he was played by a man named Paddy Considine. Or
Mm.
Considine, I think I'm saying that last name right. I might be butchering it. Um, and I thought that this character, I thought that it was kind of a great choice for casting because he looks very out of place. I think in the Targaryen robes and the wig and his get up for the show, but I think I may be giving them too much credit here, but I think that that's intentional.
Yeah, I kind of got that too. I think that maybe to a lesser degree, like one thing that I really kind of took from him, and also, and to give the show credit from a lot of the characters, something I took from is like there's a lot of moral ambiguity and a lot of choices where I see where you're coming from. It doesn't mean that I agree with you, but I understand why you did what you did. Yet again, I don't really agree with you, but I understand. A lot of decisions like that were being made, and with him in particular, it was done without me getting any kind of whiplash, or with me feeling like this guy some kind of schizophrenic. It was done in a way that makes sense for normal people. And so right off the bat, that was one thing that really intrigued me about his character. And I think, like you said, mentioning his look, his appearance, just kind of adds to that.
Yeah, I mean, he kind of seems like maybe he never expected to end up on the throne, right?
Mhm.
He's kind of in over his head. He's not botching it to the extent that like Robert Baratheon was in Game of Thrones, but he's also no Ned Stark either.
Hmm.
It's like he's clever enough, and I think he has a great small council, right? I think it's we'll talk about them in a minute, but I think
Yeah.
he's surrounded himself by a very good inner circle, with the exception of his brother, which we'll get to. But he doesn't seem like he's a complete madman.
Yeah.
Now, uh, we may have a lot of people. I probably started to like him uh, until a certain moment in the episode, at
Mm-hmm.
which point I think he's irredeemable now. In a way that a character should be, though, not in a way of like, oh, they ruined the character, but in a way where it's like, well, I don't think there's anything he could do to win me back,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So we definitely will talk about that scene. It's because uh, that I mean that was something else.
Yeah.
Um, so let's go through the rest of the sort of main players here. So we have his brother, Daemon Targaryen, played by Matt Smith. He will be very happy to be part of something that people like. Not since Doctor Who has he had that experience.
Yeah, yeah. Man, it's kind of funny. He's like the opposite coin of Ned Stark, in the sense that like that was kind of like our he was like the one the character who people recognize from other properties. So like us casually like, oh yeah, we know him, you know.
Right.
And then he was also like the kind of everyman good guy ruler, straight laced kind of guy. And then we have Matt Smith here playing Damon, and it's like, hey, we know this guy, we recognize him, we feel comfortable. But again, his characterization is not like Ned Stark.
Yeah, I mean, I really was intrigued by Damon here because it would be easy in the early in the episode to go, yeah, this guy is just the new Joffrey, right? Because those kind of
Yeah.
comparisons are easy to make,
Mm-hmm.
and they could have very easily fallen into like a Mass Effect Andromeda sort of situation here where they were like, oh, we'll just change this character just a little bit,
Right.
and we just give you the same character. But
Yeah.
but I think I don't think that Damon is by the end of the episode irredeemable.
Uh,
Um, I think reckless, but I don't think irredeemable.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to an earlier comment I made about how there is a lot of kind of moral ambiguity to some of these characters, which I appreciate because it's relatable or understandable. Like you kind of see moral ambiguity in your kind of everyday lives, and so even with Damon, it's like, okay, the guy's he's a bit of a dick, you know. He's less Joffrey and more I would maybe say like a season two, maybe season three, Jamie, in terms of like his attitude.
Right.
Uh, and but no, I agree. Like I don't think that he's irredeemable. And geez, I hate to go back to the whole subverting the expectations gimmick, but he's one who I think could possibly subvert a lot of people's expectations in terms of maybe what he does. Again, I'm a filthy casual who knows nothing. So who knows what I'm walking into?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Damon is his armor's really cool. He rides a big ass dragon.
Yeah.
It's hard to dislike someone who does that unless they're just brutally murdering characters that you like or innocents or something like that. Now, his kind of radicalization of the gold cloaks is definitely alarming.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen what happens when the gold cloaks are in the hands of people who should not have them, and it has next thing you know they'll be slaughtering babies and tossing them off the walls of King's Landing. But at least I could sort of see the reasoning by a lot of his actions, and I gotta give it to him. The whole air for a day thing, that was such an awesome moment, and I can't really put it into words how I felt about it because they broke a lot of rules here, right? Like number one, they don't actually show him say it,
Mm-hmm.
and and normally one of the big rules is
Yeah.
show don't tell.
Right.
But I think that this is one of the rare instances where breaking that rule was incredibly effective and possibly more effective than showing us the actual moment.
No, I agree. Um, Actually, I wholeheartedly agree with that statement. because the way it played out, and it had a lot to do with the way that it was shot, really. And because it was shot so well, with us kind of getting those back and forth moments between the council and between Damon at the whorehouse or the bar, wherever he was at, it just played out masterfully.
Yeah, I was a huge fan of how it went, and I think it's my second favorite moment in the episode.
Mm,
Um, and it was so iconic, and I think that line is gonna live on for a long time. I think that's gonna be right up there with the whole, like, he who passes the sentence should swing the sword, or
yeah.
the Daenerys, I will break the wheel, or any of those like iconic lines. I think that one's right up there
Yeah, one is
with
not
his.
simply walking to Mordor, and I'm pretty sure that was said in Game of Thrones season one.
Um,
Yeah,
you know what? I'll give it to you.
you
I'll
should
give it
go
to you.
back and rewatch it. It's there.
You know, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I haven't done that in a long time. I haven't seen it in a very long time. So I'll give that to you. Um, all right. So I want to talk about the only character that I think at this point in time, and I think that's going to change. The only character in this point in time that I think is like surefire on the good side of things morally would be Rhaenyra, which is
Mhm.
the only living child of Viserys, his daughter, and she has a pretty relatable kind of experience with a lot of people, especially in like a medieval sense, where she's the only child, she's a daughter, and her dad, from the day that she's been born, her entire life, he has basically just been waiting for a son, and that's it.
Right. And now, you may have a different reading on this because, again, you've literally read the book on this. But just from this one episode, and maybe I'm looking too much into too many context clues, but I got the feeling that she maybe never wanted the throne because maybe in her mind she never even thought about having or sitting on the throne because it was never a possibility. So why consider it? It'd be one of those things like, what would you do with $1 billion? But why would I even think about that? I'll never have $1 billion, and then you get it, and then you're like, oh shit, okay, what do I do with this now? Like just with the actresses, kind of reactions and the way that just some of the dialogue that she says makes me think that she wasn't really concerned about it because in her mind it's an impossibility.
Right, and I think with Rhaenyra, it's also like her role on the small council is she's a cupbearer.
Yeah.
She's not really even on the damn council. It's like that was one of the earliest things I noticed in the whole episode. Is I already knew who she was playing because I had looked up the cast,
Mm,
and I look at it and I'm like, she's pouring wine for people, and I'm
right.
like, isn't that the princess?
Right.
They should have had some random serf doing that. You know what I mean? Some peasant, not the princess. Shouldn't be the damn cupbearer.
Yeah, she passes butter. Yeah.
Right, right. Oh my god. Yeah, I mean that's such a huge kind of insult to have somebody who's considered royalty and they're out there pouring wine for your small council.
Right.
But that's what she was doing, and I think that she never thought about being on the throne, but she didn't want to be at court either. She has that
Mhm.
brief conversation with her mother where she's like, I don't want to bear children. I want, to go out here and, I want to be a knight and ride a dragon and, have armor and all this other stuff. It's, and once again, I don't like those one-to-one comparisons, but she's got that sort of Arya Stark mentality where she
Yeah.
doesn't want to grow up and live in a castle.
Right. And I'm looking for the person who like I don't want any of that.
Right. Well, they didn't have video games, man, and
Oh,
and
that's
the, and
true.
most of the books weren't very good. So
Yeah, that's true.
you had to do something to pass the time. I guess you could go become a farmer.
You never mind. Yeah, I think I just
Yeah.
go die in battle.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
At
Yeah.
least there'd be some sort of end to that.
Right.
And even then, like, there's no telling, what kind of wildlings or raiders or whatever would come through and just, take all your
Yeah.
possessions and kill you and whatever else. So,
It's kind of shitty all the way around, I guess.
right. Uh, so I want to talk about kind of the Westeros power couple here,
Hmm.
um, and people are going to refuse Rhaenys with Rhaenyra. So you have Rhaenys Valerian and Lord Corlys Valerian. Now Rhaenys, if you remember, is the other heir that was up for the throne against Viserys originally.
Right. The queen that never was. Is that?
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's her.
Gotcha.
That's her. And she is married to Lord Corlys Valerian, who is the guy with the awesome. I'm assuming that's a wig with all the dreads and
Right.
everything.
Right.
He just looks cool.
Yeah.
And there are trolls on the internet that are upset that there's a black person who's rich in Westeros, and we're going to ignore them
Yeah. Yeah. Just yeah. Yeah.
because their opinions are invalid.
Right.
But Lord Corlys Valerian is a descendant of old Valyria, just like the Targaryens,
Gotcha.
which is a kind of a cool feature of them. And then also he is like the wealthiest guy in Westeros,
Oh damn.
and he has the biggest fleet.
Now,
So
is he the master of coin on the council?
yeah, I'm pretty sure that he is the master of coin. Yeah.
That would make sense then.
Wait, no. He's not the master of coin. He's the master of coin is Lyman Beesbury.
Okay.
He doesn't really do a whole lot. He's just kind of he doesn't really have a whole lot of role in the show. I'm trying to remember what his um, actual role is.
Right.
But they actually have a spin-off series in development that's supposedly going to be called the Sea Snake. It's not greenlit. It's just in early development, but it's going to be about like him. He's
Oh
going to be like
shit.
the main character. Yeah. But I don't remember what his exact title is on the small council. I'm sure someone is yelling it at their car or phone right now. They're just like, listen to this noob. He doesn't know what Lord Corlys' role on the small council is, but you have to forgive me on this one because I don't know. Um, the two of them I thought were great. They don't have a lot to do in this episode, but you
Hmm.
can tell that they are sort of the power players here. They have, I would say, kind of a similar role um, uh, to like what Littlefinger and Varys had
Right.
in Game of Thrones, where they are sort of the people who are pulling the strings behind the scenes. The
Right.
spotlight is on somebody else, and they're kind of manipulating things.
Yeah. Yeah, I got that kind of feeling too. Um, and again, like this is just me kind of reading again in the context clues. But the queen that never was, but what was her name again?
Her name is Rhaenys,
Rhaenys, that's right. Fucking George R. R. Martin, man, his goddamn names. Uh
especially for Targaryens.
yes. But I got the feeling that Rhaenys, like she maybe wasn't bitter, but felt justifiably upset that she was overlooked. And it it kind of seems like even though a lot of time has passed since then, that she's again not maybe not bitter is the wrong word, but she's still I don't know is maybe a little sore about it just because now then the situation again where hell I mean feasibly speaking it would make sense for maybe for her to pick up the mantle.
Right. I mean, with her already being married,
Hmm.
I think that would be a complication because then it's like, are the Valerians going to take
Yeah,
the throne going forward? And they're not going to have that.
right, right.
So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with these two. I'm interested. I'm really intrigued by the whole idea of the two of them, and as sort of infamous figures in like Westeros history. They are probably the two that I was the most interested in coming into this.
Mm.
Um, he's the master of ships. That's his role in the
Oh,
story,
okay, okay,
which
gotcha.
makes sense. You know, he has the big ass fleet,
Right.
the BAF as they call it in Westeros.
All right, I'm gonna have to fact check you on that one.
um, the rest of the small council. So we have Lyman Beesbury as master of coin. We have the Grand Maester Melos, and then we have Lionel Strong, who is the Master of Laws. And these are kind of the people that don't have a ton to do in the episode other than the Grand Maester.
Right.
And the Grand Maester seems like he's very inefficient. He seems like he's pretty inept as far as his job goes.
That seems to be a running theme, like there's been a few Grand Maesters, it seems, who are just kind of there.
I think being the Grand Maester and getting assigned to be at King's Landing, you would think that that would be like, oh man, you're the Grand Maester. You're like the guy. And
Right.
it's like, I kind of feel like it's actually probably the worst job in the realm if you're a Maester. Other than if you get assigned to like the Dreadfort. You know,
Mm.
nobody wants to go live with the Boltons.
Yeah, fuck that.
Yeah. I think I'm good as far as that goes. But I mean, you know, it seems like this is the assignment. You're working right up under a king all day, every day.
Right.
This dude can just get pissed off and have you executed at any point.
Yeah, yeah.
So, moving on, I want to talk about Otto Hightower, who's the hand of the king here. Until a certain moment in this episode, he was like far and above my favorite character.
See, like there seems to be another running theme, like up until this moment, this character really had me.
Right.
Yeah, and
Right.
I think I, and everybody else is in agreement with that moment.
I think Rhaenyra is the only character that doesn't have a moment like that,
Yeah,
where she's just pretty awesome all the way through.
right.
And I think they're going to do a time skip at some point because they've already cast an actress to play an older version of her.
Oh,
So, you know that's. I guess maybe we'll see that at some point. I don't think it happens right now, but I mean it's possible. We walk into episode 2 with a time skip. It could happen at any point.
right. Yeah.
Um, but what did you think about the Hand of the King here, Otto Hightower?
Yeah, so I think that he had maybe the coolest dialogue.
Yes,
Um, I mean, like he has some real quotables in this episode. Um, I think that he does seem like he has his head on straight. You understand why this man is the hand of the king. Uh,
absolutely.
yeah, like this man is like all logic and all business, and he's the one who's gonna bring the facts to the table, who's gonna try his best to check emotion at the door. And even though you can tell he doesn't like Damon, everything he says about Damon is, kind of objectively true. Uh, and so like I really like this character. He seems his demeanor reminds me of like a more calmed down Tywin. You know, uh, he still has that kind of stoicism about him, that feeling of I don't want to piss this guy off, but slightly less of a douchebag until you get to that certain point in the episode.
It's interesting the way that these small council meetings play out because it's very easy for like a political meeting to get boring in a television show of
Yes.
any kind. But I thought the way that they use the small council here, even though there's a lot of screen time, I think it's used very effectively because we get a couple of different scenes with them. The first scene we get with them is kind of introducing everyone, setting the stage. This is when we're setting up the tournament. Um, we kind of get introduced to who Damon is without him being there at that small council meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And then, later on, we get a kind of what are we going to do about this situation? Like, yeah, I mean, this is after, the queen and the prince have both died. We have the whole Damon dropping the line, the air for the day line. And it's we kind of see the machinations here as they go through, and it's like we have a council meeting early in the episode, kind of in the middle, and then one kind of more towards the end, and this is where they're talking about who the heir should be.
Right.
So we go from yeah, we're preparing for the prince to be born. We're gonna have this awesome tournament. Let's not spend all the money. And then by the end of the episode, the conversation has changed entirely. Not to let's celebrate this thing that's happening, but let's try to somehow, everything has gone to shit. Let's make the best out of it that we possibly can.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And it's interesting that you point out like how much time we actually spend with these council meetings and just how they are always very interesting. Like I was able to watch the episode twice, and like both times, like the first time I found myself paying attention because I didn't know who the hell anyone was and who they were talking about. But the second time I found myself paying attention just because I was so intrigued with how everything was unfolding. And it is interesting how like at least each council member who has like speaking lines, you can kind of see where they might have certain motives. You can also kind of see where like they're really just trying to do their job to the best of their abilities. So I really dig it.
yeah, I agree. I was very impressed by kind of how all of those scenes played out. Two more characters I want to talk about here, and we'll get into some specific plot points.
Mhm.
So we have Otto's daughter, Alicent Hightower, and she is, of course, the Hand of the King's daughter. She's very, awesome friends with Rhaenyra. They seem like they're kind of inseparable. I knowing the history and knowing what's coming, I really enjoyed their relationship with each other and the way that she factored in to all of this. Um, what did you think about this character? And I do in a minute want to talk specifically about her, for lack of a better term, side quest that she's given.
Uh, I think that this kid may be wise beyond her years, and in all the scenes that we see her in, she's constantly trying to be a counsel, to someone. No pun intended to the high council shit. Uh, but she's constantly trying to either like spread knowledge or information. She's consistently keeping a level head, and she genuinely also seems like just another really good person here. And that makes me nervous because in anything Game of Thrones adjacent, good people with pure motives typically don't end up too well. So
They're either their motives turn sour or they get raped and or killed and or both.
burninated.
Yeah, I forgot about burninated. You at least you can get the fast burnination at this point in time.
That's
Like
true.
like in Westeros that we know from the Game of Thrones era, Melisandre was gonna like burn you at the stake. That was gonna take a minute. You
Right.
had you had to roll very poorly to run into Daenerys and Drogon and get roasted like that. But they got a lot of dragons at this point in time.
Yeah. Do we know how many they have exactly? I know at the top of the episode they said that like previously they had like 10 adult dragons, but how many do they have now?
So we see three in the episode.
Mhm.
We know that Balerion the Dread is dead because that's the skull that they
That
talk in
big ass
front.
dragon.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's the largest known dragon in Westeros history. He was the only creature alive at the moment that he died that ever saw Old Valyria
Sheesh.
before the Doom. Um, and that became much more important here because I'm such a junkie for the lore here, and there's a couple of things that get dropped in this episode that just delighted me to no end. But I don't know the exact dragon count on here, but I can tell you that the events of this show, at least per the histories, are the thing that kind of leads to them dying out.
Oh.
Um, yeah, because I don't want to. I'm not going to get into any spoilers, but it's pretty clear that we're kind of edging towards a sort of Targaryen civil war here.
Gotcha.
And so when you have dragon riders in a war against other dragon riders, the population of dragons and Targaryens is going to go down considerably.
That math is mathing.
Yeah, so it's mathin' time, and and we are going to end up, I think by the end of the series, it's going to be pretty obvious how we ended up, sort of with the Mad King era of everything, and how the Targaryens really started to decline,
Mm,
because the events of this show are going to be kind of the avalanche, I think, that kind of leads into to that. Um,
gotcha.
One more main character I want to discuss, and he was almost blink and you miss him, but they discuss Sir Kristen Cole here, who's a Dornish knight. He's the one who fights and beats Daemon in the tournament.
Yeah, I was gonna say he kind of kicked some ass there. I was very surprised to see that this guy won. Like that was all I needed to know to kind of piece together that maybe we see this guy a little bit more. You don't put the kid over unless you plan on using him again.
Right, exactly. And he's going to have an interesting relationship with Rhaenyra, and he's going to play into all of the events that unfold. So he will be somebody to keep an eye on.
Mm,
So, a couple of major things that happened in this episode, some key moments. We kind of already talked about the Air for a Day. Let's talk about the way that line comes about. Um, so they have the tournament here, and during the tournament, we're seeing the scenes for the tournament are juxtaposed against the scenes of the birth scene in the bed chambers or whatever. The queen, Rhaenyra's mother, is in childbirth, and she says what I thought was a very poignant line earlier in the episode to Rhaenyra. She
mhm.
says the birth bed is our battlefield.
Yeah, I picked up on that on my second watch through, and I was like, maybe you shouldn't have said that. And and another thing definitely probably should not have said to her husband was, no matter what, this is the last one.
Yeah, I mean, because that definitely weighed on him to some extent, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Um, Although I can't say his decision here would have been any different
maybe not.
had she not said it. But it's obvious that she's having a hard time dealing with the whole pregnancy here. And that line that she says to Rhaenyra is by the end of the episode you see just how true it really is, and I mean that really was true of the like kind of women in the medieval era where it's like this was their purpose,
Yeah,
especially queens. In like the modern era, we think of a queen as somebody who has a lot of power and authority, typically, or like a figurehead. But really, I mean, in this point in time, it was like you were basically going to be treated the same way as like a peasant wife would. You just get to live in a castle.
right.
And there's expectations around, you've got to deliver an heir. That
Yeah.
was your sole purpose in life. And I thought that this episode did a great job highlighting that. And then the way that they went back and forth between the tournament and the knights fighting and the bedchamber with the childbirth, I thought that was shot incredibly well.
Yeah, and it's kind of crazy because how those two scenes were shown intermittently between one another. It's like you get this tournament which is simulating war, which should be a terrible, dreadful thing where life is lost. But because it's just a simulation of it, people are cheering and whatnot and having a great time. They're celebrating. Meanwhile, in the bed chambers, where the queen is, trying to give birth, should be a celebratory moment. If all things go, perfectly, it should be a celebratory moment. It should be this great, wonderful thing for for her and her family in the kingdom. But instead, she's literally her and her child are fighting for their lives and losing.
Right, exactly. And we see the decision that gets made by Viserys here. Now, to his credit, and this doesn't excuse anything he does here. If they can't get the kid out, they're both gonna die.
Yeah, yeah.
So, it was pretty easy, I think, for a lot of people to look at this as like, oh, he made this horrible decision. He did make a horrible decision in today's terms, and even in those days'
Mhm.
terms. But the alternative was very likely going to be both of them dying. Now,
Yeah.
if you're going to cut that kid out of me, though, just kill me.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
like at least make it quick. I don't want to, get like reverse aliened, you know, because that was like
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you right now. We watched a lot of horrible shit happen to people in Game of Thrones, but
Hmm.
I think that scene is one of the hardest things I have ever had to watch.
It's gruesome. And you know what? I think the thing of it is like what makes it so gruesome is A, the method in which it's done, and B, out of all the kind of fantastical, over the top deaths we've seen in Game of Thrones, this one was one of the more grounded ones.
Right.
Something that for sure actually happened at some point in history.
Right. And I think that is honestly what makes it so awful. I
Yeah.
mean, to just go to that place, and the way it's shot is so intimate. They put the camera really up close to her, to Viserys, and he's sitting there. Don't be scared, even though knowing he's just condemned her to death.
Hmm.
He wants this heir more than anything,
Yeah.
and and of course, the one of the great things about people that make awful decisions in Game of Thrones, it never works out for them for very long.
Right.
It might work out for you in the short term, but to quote Ramsey Bolton, one of those iconic lines, "If you think this has a happy ending, you haven't been paying attention."
Yes.
And that's gonna be every single character in this show, pretty much. We know that most of these people in this show are gonna die before the end. And you know what? I would honestly be a little bit shocked if we don't see every single one of these characters we've discussed here today bite it in this show. It could
Wow.
definitely happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, Especially when you consider the fact that they all definitely got to be dead before Game of Thrones. It's 172 years.
Yeah, that's true. Well, and that's just up to Danny being born, so that's the
Oh yeah.
rebellion. Speaking of the rebellion, man, so we got to talk about this. This scene, um, this scene to me is the this had my head spinning, and I'm gonna tell you, there's very few times where something has happened, and I've been this just in depth, like just I could not turn my brain off about it. I still can't turn my brain off about it, and
It's
that's the
just a,
very last scene.
oh, okay. I thought you were gonna say the Matt Smith sex scene, but go ahead.
No, that was interesting too. I didn't see that coming, but this is Game of Thrones, so sex position is a popular and effective storytelling tool in
Right.
Westeros. But I'm talking about the scene we have the coronation of Rhaenyra. After we get the line from Daemon about the heir for the day. His brother finds out about it. They have this excellent scene in the throne room,
Hmm.
which, by the way, I love the fact that the throne is now way more accurate to the books.
Yeah. See, I didn't know that the throne was supposed to look, differently from what we got from Game of Thrones, but it looks much more rugged. It looks much more jagged. It looks like a dragon just smelted together a bunch of swords, and then like a blacksmith came in and just chiseled out a seat portion. Like
And that's what it's supposed to look like.
oh, gotcha.
They made it look a little more majestic in Game of Thrones, and it seems like that's something that, like, the Baratheons and the Lannisters would have done.
Right.
Um, but we get that awesome scene in the throne room. We got the more accurate throne. I think it's a lot more. I think it tells its own story to an extent.
Mm.
Because one of the thing about all those swords surrounding it means we got a lot of scenes in Game of Thrones where Joffrey is like sitting up there next to people. He's up there next to Cersei or Tywin or whoever his whatever bride he was torturing at the time or whatever. But no one can sit up there with you
Yeah.
in the way that the throne is right now. You are up there alone, and I think that the symbolism there was very powerful.
Yeah. What do you make of the throne cutting the king, even to the point where he has like a weird infection?
I don't think that is from the throne. I'm very interested to know where that's going to lead.
Mm.
It almost looked like the grayscale wounds that after they
Oh,
like when they were cutting into Jorah
right.
in Game of Thrones. It looked incredibly similar to that.
It did kind of, yeah, that yellow banana pudding pus.
Ugh.
It, I I kind of took it as like a bad omen, but I didn't have any basis for that. It's just by the events that unfold in the episode, it was like maybe if this throne fucking cuts you, that means bad news for you. Because then they cut Joffrey at one point, and then well, we know what happened to Joffrey.
That's true. I mean, the throne is meant to be incredibly uncomfortable to sit on. Like it's not a thing that you would actually want to be in there chilling on all day.
Yeah.
It's literally a bunch of weapons melted by a dragon. Uh, but the scene that I could not turn my brain off about is the very end, and this is a retcon, but it's a soft retcon, and it's an incredible attempt to explain why everything went to shit in Game of Thrones. So the very last scene where he talks about Aegon's conquest of Westeros,
Hmm.
and he tells Rhaenyra that this is a secret that's passed down from all the Targaryen kings, and that Aegon didn't do it just for conquest, but because he had a dream called the Song of Fire and Ice, which is what the book series is called.
Right.
Um, that basically a great winter would come and all of Westeros would have to be united in order to fight against it, and that a Targaryen had to unite the realms in order to do that. Fire versus ice. This scene to me, the monumental weight of this discussion, and like I said, it's a soft retcon, but I love it, so I'm gonna allow it 100%. Yeah, it doesn't excuse season 8 of Game of Thrones or even 7, but what it does do is it reframes everything, because when we have Robert's Rebellion, obviously the Mad King Aerys, if he passed on this information to anyone, it would have been his eldest son Rhaegar who was going to become the king.
Right.
Rhaegar is killed at the Trident in Robert's Rebellion. And then, of course, the Mad King Aerys is infamously killed by Jaime Lannister. So everyone who knows about this is dead.
Right.
And so it is entirely possible that Jon Snow was, in fact, the prince that was promised, that he was Azor Ahai, and that he
Oh.
was supposed to have some sort of incredible role in everything. But the rebellion basically put us in like the darkest timeline,
Right.
because the Aegon's dream and his sort of purpose of uniting Westeros against the threat of the White Walkers as we know it was completely destroyed by the rebellion. So everything that happens after that sort of throws all of that off course.
Damn. I never. Yeah, I didn't even consider that small scene potentially meaning that much, but that is kind of a domino effect when you lay it out like that.
And it's easy to put it on Robert Baratheon, but I mean at the same time, I mean King Aerys was a freaking madman and was like
Right.
doing all kinds of horrendous shit.
Hey,
So
you can't stay mad at Bobby B.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. You can't. Try as we may.
Right.
So but it is it is interesting to see that series of events, like the Targaryen houses, and that series of events, like we said, of House Targaryen falling from grace. That starts right here in this episode,
Right.
um, and it snowballs up until the rebellion, and then the rebellion kind of ensures that no one knows about this. Nobody
Yeah,
has
it's
this
true. Yeah,
vision.
like because this, like you said, like the yeah, like that kind of telling it dies with yeah. So that is a kind of interesting thing I didn't even think about. Huh.
Yeah, yeah. That scene to me, I mean, the hair on my arms was like standing up
Yeah.
when he was telling her all of that. And I don't know if you noticed this other little tidbit. Did you notice what the weapon that he has on his side?
Was that the cat's paw dagger?
It is.
Okay, I
Yeah.
thought it was like that. It's like either they use like the same prop or that is deliberately that same dagger.
Yep. That's it. He has the dagger on him while he's telling her all of this. And so
Jeez.
it was so interesting. Like we know that that's the dagger that delivers the final blow, even though it doesn't make any sense.
We don't need to talk about that.
Yeah, we don't need it. I don't want to go down that path. But I did think it was interesting how that one sort of soft retcon where he tells her all of that. It really just reframed all of Game of Thrones in a different manner. It's really like a disaster story now more than anything,
Right.
because I mean literally everything goes to complete shit.
Yeah. Man, yeah, when you put it that way, damn. Yeah, Bobby B kind of fucked that one up. But
Yeah,
like you said, for understandable reason.
yeah. I mean King Ares was terrible.
Yeah.
So um, all right, man. So I think we've really covered all of the sort of major points here. What's kind of your final thoughts on this episode?
Yeah. So, one more thing I wanted to point out that really stood out to me about this episode was this episode was how long? Like an hour and 15,
Yeah,
somewhere
and it
around there.
flies by.
I was just gonna say that. Like the pacing of this episode was tremendous. Like there really wasn't a wasted moment. And I was kind of comparing it to my recollections of uh, episode 101 of Game of Thrones. And while that is a really enjoyable episode, a lot of that episode, a lot of that first season, it's a slow burn, it's a slow build up, so that you can get all the proper information that you need and whatnot. Whereas this episode, it just flew by. Even on second watch through, like it really flies by. Like there's not that much wasted screen time. So I really appreciated that. That they give you like the exposition that you need. They introduce you to the characters you need to know, and you either keep up or go back and rewatch some shit.
Right.
Um, but I thought that was incredible. I really dig the casting and the characters so far. I think that we have a very intriguing set of characters right now. And I remember Kevin, my co-host on the Superhero Homies podcast, he watched probably a good 45 minutes of the episode with me, and he was asking me like, okay, so is there is there like a Ned Stark character, or is there a Jon Snow, is there Arya character? And it's like, actually, no. Like so far, all these characters feel like they're their own people, and that was kind of another really cool thing about this, is that they don't feel like rehashes or repeats of fan favorites from Game of Thrones. Uh,
Right.
but as it stands, I gotta admit, man, while my hype for this show was very small in the beginning, as it stands right now, I really enjoyed this episode, and I'm really looking forward to seeing episode 2, man. I hope they can keep this momentum because they could have me hooked again.
Yeah, I mean, we talked earlier about how like Dan and Dave don't have anything to do with this.
Mhm.
The showrunners are actually somebody who is new to Game of Thrones, a guy by the name of Ryan J. Condal. He was the director of Rampage, the movie with The Rock where he's got the giant gorilla.
You're kidding.
Nope. He also was the showrunner on Colony.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, he was also a writer on the 2014 Hercules film, but I don't think I ever saw that.
I did. That's the Brett Ratner movie, and I don't know why I watched it. Uh, that there's so much about everything you just said that's incredible. Like, and it doesn't make sense.
And then the other showrunner is Miguel, and I'm gonna butcher this last name, Sapochnik. Um, and he actually is not new to the franchise. He actually was the director for several episodes of Game of Thrones, and it's a mixed bag because he did Hard Home, which is
Mm,
the excellent episode where they go and liberate the Wildling Village and Jon Snow like fights off the White Walkers and
right.
stuff.
That was
Very
awesome.
cool.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a great episode. He also directed Battle of the Bastards.
Holy shit. So
Yeah,
he did Hard Home and Battle of the Bastards, like two of the like biggest fan favorite episodes.
yeah. He also did Winds of Winter, which is the last episode of that season. I think that's the end of season 6,
Sheesh.
if I'm not mistaken. And then, unfortunately, um, he also did The Long Night.
Oh.
Why did your voice change there, man? Why did your demeanor change a little bit? I don't.
It didn't. It's just the microphone.
And here's the thing. Here's the thing. It's not that he wrote that stuff.
Right.
He just directed it.
Yeah.
Although the lighting was horrible in that episode, so hopefully he'll take notice to that, and we won't have any. Um, I get their idea of like, well, there was nowhere for the light to come from. Okay, but it's a television show,
Right.
so if we can't see it, then it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Don't waste your time. But to circle back to what you said about the pacing, I wholeheartedly agree with the pacing. I watched this twice and it zipped by both times.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that it's hard to be critical of like Game of Thrones as far as tone goes because I mean, they've never had a tone issue. That's never been the problem.
Right.
So
There is just one small thing I want to point out, and I'll be damned if I didn't end it on a note like this. Uh, but I don't know if this is something that George R. R. Martin does, or I don't know whose call it is to put this in here. But in like a few episodes of Game of Thrones, and in this episode of House of the Dragon, if you watch with subtitles, you'll see that when people are frightened, sometimes they fart, and and so like the guy who gets his coin purse cut off, uh, as this is about to happen, if you watch the subtitles, you will see, and if you listen carefully, you will hear, yeah, the man he lets one go.
gotta love George R. R.
Yeah,
Martin.
like, all right, George. All right.
I guarantee you, he insisted that detail be in the show. I
uh,
assure you of this.
damn it.
Man, yeah, that I try not to read anything George R. R. Martin says because as somebody who considers themselves an avid like fantasy reader now and is like really into those communities, I'm just like, shut the fuck up, George. Like it was your ending.
Right.
You're gonna change it now, and I would too. But he really likes to act like he didn't have anything to do with that. Like he didn't get final pass on all of the scripts. It's like, oh man, I don't have time to write books. I'm working on Game of Thrones all the time, and then he still doesn't have Winds of Winter done, and it's been like 8 years. I think it's been longer than that actually, and now though he's like, well, I didn't really have anything to do with it. I mean, they were the showrunners. It was like, well, what were you doing then?
Right.
Because you sure weren't writing. I mean, I would venture to say I've written more this year than George R. R. Martin has.
I think that's a safe bet.
I think so. I
Yeah.
would put my paycheck on it.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
All right, man. So if before we wrap up here, if you had to score this one now out of 10, where are you at coming out of this first episode?
Man, off the top of the head, I don't see a reason to give it anything less than a 9. I thought this was excellent. It did everything it needed to do. I think that this is accessible for both new fans and old casual fans and hardcore book readers. I would assume is good for all of them too. And again, man, the pacing, the casting, the characters, the right amount of action in it that was shot very well. The writing and dialogue, everything was done like it's almost like HBO knew they needed to knock this one out of the park. It was excellent.
Warner Brothers as a whole really could use some good press right now
Yeah,
in general, and I think this is everything they could have asked for. I don't know if it changes the tone on WB Discovery right now in the media. That's hard to do, but I think it changes the tone on Game of Thrones like immensely because I was in the ballpark of I'm not even gonna watch this. I told you off mic before the show started, like, hey, I'm gonna give this 3 episodes, and if it doesn't wow me by then, I'm turning it off. I'm not wasting my time. Well, they didn't even take half of one episode,
yeah.
and I'm hooked on it. I mean, it doesn't change any of the shit they did for Game of Thrones, but I mean, I'm literally salivating, waiting for the next episode to come out.
I think the only thing that could have made this episode better, and maybe I would have given it a 10, would be if Ezra Miller had shown up. And that would have.
And by the way, you pulled a Kevin on me and you ripped my rating right out of my skull. I was absolutely gonna say a 9 as well, um, because it just there's like little things here and there. I don't know that it does anything to earn a 10, because to me to get a 10, you got to really knock something out of the park.
Agreed.
But I think for a first episode of a brand new series in an established world, they dodged so many of those things that we have come to just be fearful of from this type of property, right? Because number one, it's a prequel.
Hmm.
Number two, they're going back to the well. Number three, it's in a universe that people are pissed off about, but is well known.
Yeah.
It has all that going against it. So the fact that they did not turn their characters into caricatures of people we already know. The fact that they avoided that pitfall. They didn't change anything significant. Honestly, when they were doing the shots of King's Landing, it like just the changes in it over the next 180 or so years, I really loved all of those shots.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, it was just so cool to see like the little, you see like the dragon statue, and you're like, well, I know why that's not there,
Right.
or the dragon pit was very cool to see it actually there. Whereas like they destroyed it, it's like the arena where they after they capture the white,
Oh yeah.
from the
Yeah.
Night King, and they have it in the box and bring it out and everything. That's where that happened. It was at the Dragon Pit, but it had been destroyed. It was the ruins of the Dragon Pit.
Damn,
Um,
that's right.
yeah, yeah. After the rebellion, they destroyed it.
Man.
Yeah. So, we got to see all of these kind of things in King's Landing that were really cool, I mean it gave me the nostalgia kick of being back there, in this location we spent so much time in the show. It feels more like King's Landing than anything we saw in the last 2 seasons of Game of Thrones.
Yeah. Right.
So, well, man, I think it's time to wrap it up. I definitely appreciate you joining me here for this episode, man, and I am waiting with bated breath for the next one. As a matter of fact, we're gonna have to talk to Oz, our DM, about moving our D&D games because I got somewhere to be at 9 p.m. now.
That's right. Right. Man. And like, yeah, with this show, man, again, like I'm really looking forward to seeing this next episode, and I'm also really looking forward to listening to all of your reviews on it. Um, I can tell you just from like way back when Kevin and I would do like the Watchmen TV show review, or even something silly like the Harley Quinn TV show. Like whenever you watch a TV show and then you talk about each episode in like a podcasting format, it really does open up your mind to a lot of possibilities and a lot of things that maybe you otherwise wouldn't have noticed. And I know you have a keen eye for these things, so I'm looking forward to hearing what you think about these upcoming episodes.
Well, I am a self-admitted lore slut. I love lore. I'm all about it. I think that was actually coined on an episode of your show,
Yeah.
that term. So, yeah, I mean, I'm definitely all about it. I'm hyped once again to see, where this goes, and I think they have a great cast, and I think the stage is set for a ton of tragedy, and it's almost terrifying to think about what they could do now that they know the audience is coming in. They know what they're getting now.
Right.
It's not like Game of Thrones where you're like, oh, is this like Lord of the Rings? Oh no, you know, it's not like that. People know what they're getting here, so it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in episode 2 and beyond.
Yeah. Same.
Well, with all that being said, man, I definitely appreciate you joining me here. We got to have you back on the show as soon as possible. Maybe for another review of this, but some of those later A&E biography episodes got me wanting to maybe discuss some of those with you as well. So we got a lot coming up here on the show.
Absolutely, brother. I always love being on, and I can't thank you enough for having me on. It really is an honor that you chose me to kind of be the guest for the first episode of House of the Dragon. Like, yeah, that's a big deal, man. I do appreciate that.
You were available on short notice.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, I
I was
can't think
the
of.
one who picked up the phone.
Yeah, yeah, you'd pick the phone up for me and agree to appear in public with me, or be heard in public with me now. So I guess
Right.
we're not on video anymore. Well, that is the perfect note to end this one on. So we will be back next week with our review of episode 2. But for now, this has been an Involved Review.